There it goes. We're working. But I lost my chat. Let's see. Yep, I lost my chat feature. Let's see if it comes up. No. Okay. All right. You should be able to see me. Good. One more time. Can you hear me now? All right, good. All right, let's get started. I'm here with Jennifer Rubin, and I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead.
All right, my name is Jennifer Rubin, and I'm a police officer with the Cape Girardeau Police Department. I was employed back in January 2018, and I now serve as a school resource officer for 5 different elementary schools.
And tell us a little bit about your education background.
Yeah, so I actually went to 2 different high schools growing up. I went to a public high school, and I went to a VOTEC high school for law enforcement. After I graduated high school, I moved down here to Cape Girardeau and attended SEMO, and I actually majored in communication studies with a minor in criminal justice and went to the police academy, and now I'm here.
Now that's a little bit of a different track. I'm sure a lot of these students think that a lot or most of the police officers are criminal justice background, criminal justice majors. Can you go into that a little bit, why you took that path?
Yeah, so I was very involved with the police department throughout college, just did different trainings with them and really got to know them. And I had all these police officers who were teaching me how to be a police officer. And I just noticed studying criminal justice, we had very few professors that had actually had experience in law enforcement. And so I kind of wanted to switch avenues a little bit, and communications helped me be a police officer. And, you know, it teaches you how to talk to people, and that's about 95% of our job is talking to people from, you know, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different, you know, social, economic backgrounds and things like that. So communications really helped me out without having people that have not been a police officer try to teach me how to be a police officer.
So in the couple of years you've been doing this, do you think you chose the correct educational path?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that was a good move.
Yes, for sure.
Okay. How about a little bit of the additional training you've had since?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly training. We have to keep up with a certain amount of hours every year just to keep our post license to continue being a police officer. I go to training, I mean, all sorts of different training. Like I've been training jiu-jitsu for 3 years to keep me physically safe while I'm working. I do, you know, we go to the shooting range a couple times a year. And I personally have taken a lot of interest into more of like the emergency management, you know, preparing my schools where if something were to happen, we're prepared for that. So I just recently went to Kansas City and back a couple weeks ago for a planning for the needs of children in disasters kind of class through FEMA. So I take a lot of classes through FEMA as well. And there's a million different avenues within law enforcement. So, I mean, there's definitely some kind of training for every avenue that you can take.
So right now you're day-to-day as a school resource officer.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about your school.
Yeah, so I have 5 different schools, and all 5 schools are very drastically different from each other. They're all 5 elementary schools, so I have kindergarten up until 4th grade. And, you know, we have one that's, you know, in a rougher neighborhood, one that's in a fantastic neighborhood, and kind of a little bit of everything in between. And so I try to get to all 5 buildings every single day if I can. Some days it's easier said than done. But more often than not, I can get to all 5 buildings. I deal with a lot of child abuse type cases. I deal with educational neglect, parents just not bringing their kids to school, and things like that, you know, disruptive students, you know, because it's one thing if, you know, students being dangerous, but it's another thing if they're being dangerous while their kids are around. So it's kind of a balancing act between 5 schools, because I joke that none of them will need me for like a week, and then all 5 of them need me at the same exact time. So it keeps me busy.
So what, and I've read some of your police reports, and they read really well, but what's some of those chaotic scenarios that you deal with that has to do with the parents specifically?
Yeah, I've already arrested a couple parents this year. One of them was a rolling on the ground fight to get her in handcuffs. She in particular was trying to, her house had been broken into by her boyfriend that morning, and she didn't want to take the kid anywhere else except for back to that house where he had threatened them with knives and hammers and, you know, things like that. And so we were doing a DFS investigation, working with Missouri Children's Division and determining if that was a safe environment for this kid to go back to. And while we were doing that investigation, the mom tried taking the child and leaving. And so we tried detaining her, just put one handcuff on her, and the fight was on, I guess, from there. So I had my taser actually pulled out, light on and everything, but that kid was like right on top of us, not wanting mom to get, hurt. So I ended up reholstering the taser in the middle of the fight and kept fighting with her, and none of the other guys got there until she was already in handcuffs. So, but yeah, I mean, that was literally the second day of school, kind of welcome back kind of thing. So, yeah, so it's been busy. You never know when that kind of stuff can happen.
So with that big adrenaline rush that day, how'd you deal with it?
I dealt with it just fine.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I've rolled on the ground with people before, and like that part by itself doesn't bother me. But I hated the fact that that kid is on top begging me not to hurt mom because he thinks it's my fault and not hers. And hopefully one day he'll understand where I had to come from with that. But I mean, in the meantime, it's an 8-year-old crying and begging and screaming, hey, don't hurt my mom and everything. And all mom had to do was listen. We were literally probably 15 minutes away from her being sent on her way somewhere else, and she just had to leave right now. And she made the poor decisions that led to that. And so, the kid has to deal with mom's bad decisions, but thinks it's my fault.
Yeah.
So that's the part that got me. But I mean, as far as the actual fighting with her, it's part of the job, something you expect, but you don't really expect a kid begging you to not hurt mom while you're doing your job. So.
The one handcuff thing's pretty rough.
Yeah, because the second handcuff was open, so I tried closing that second handcuff as quickly as I could.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, she's just flailing, arms, legs everywhere, kicking, screaming, anything she could think of.
Yeah, well, she picked that venue to have the battle, right?
Yeah, it was in the middle of the school. Yeah, in the middle of the elementary school. Luckily, the kids had been dismissed, but the staff was still there. So the staff all, police officers are used to dealing with trauma and everything, while teachers are aren't quite as much. Like, they don't see it as often. So when I'm rolling on the ground with mom and the kids on top of us, we had a bunch of teachers around, but they all kind of just looked at us because they didn't know what to do. So finally, one of them grabbed him off of us and everything.
Yeah.
And, went from there. But I'd say there's definitely like a time gap between between when we were fighting and when someone finally pulled the kid away from the situation.
You mentioned before we turned this on today that you had some little ones that you're working with now, that you see them fairly soon headed to the juvenile system or even further. What do you think could be offered to those kids that would stop that process? Because I see them all the time too. And since I've been here 35 years, I see the children of the children of the children at this point. Yeah. 3 generations sometimes. Yesterday, I watched a boy walk through here with one of my probation officers, and it's like, man, I just wish there was something else to offer him, because, he's headed to here, to drug treatment. He's might have done an armed robbery at least once that we haven't proved. Yeah. So it's like, man, I know where he's headed, but what else could there come into their life? So if you had the magic bullet for the ones you're seeing now that have really spiked up, what kind of thing you think could be offered?
Just finding a mentor that clicks, I guess, because just because you're giving a kid a mentor doesn't mean it's the mentor that's saying things in the exact way that's making the kid understand it. One of the teachers said specifically that she thinks part of the reason that a couple of these kids are having problems is because you can punish them and punish them and punish them all you want. You can take things away. You can say you can't do this, can't do that, and it just doesn't register to them. Like, losing that stuff isn't important to them. And that's like, in a school setting, that's just the natural thing to do is, okay, you didn't do your homework, you don't get to go to recess. And, and to most kids, that's traumatizing. Like, hey, I want to go play with my friends and get my energy out and stuff. And it clicks to them. But you just have that group of kids where it just doesn't click. And so you have all these teachers and these principals and everything working together. But if it's not that, if the kid isn't registering what you're saying, if the kid doesn't respect you in a certain way to understand what you're saying, no matter what you say or what you do, it just might not go through. So just maybe providing, adults from other aspects of life, other walks of life, into their lives. And I mean, eventually someone's got to click eventually. And I don't know, some kids it'll take longer than others, but I think definitely providing a mentor for them.
Mentor would be a good approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I've noticed in the last few years a lot of push toward trauma response and trauma-informed schools, trauma-informed police stations, trauma-informed foster parents. Yeah. It's like the buzzword is the trauma-informed. It's actually been around a long time. If any of my students want to look at it, look at the Memphis model of law enforcement handling of mental clients with mental health issues. It's been around 25 years, and it's just now really popping, though, into a lot of medium-sized police departments, not the larger ones. So how is that playing out in the police station and in the schools, the trauma issues?
It's kind of hard to tell, honestly, because trauma-informed and experiencing trauma are two different things. So as much as we want to understand what these kids are going through, some will just understand it better than others based on our personal backgrounds. You know, like I grew up, you know, I never had my house shot at. I never had to worry about mom and dad punching each other when I got home, you know, things like that. And so with these kids, like obviously, you know, I've seen in other situations, you know, what they're going through, but unless you're going through it every day, it's hard to truly understand what's going on in their heads. And so I'm definitely a proponent for teaching it as much as we can, but I think you can only teach it up until a certain point if you've never just experienced it yourself.
You know, one of the trainers that I've had some classes with, and I've known her a lot of years, she's actually our forensic psychologist that looks at kids when we deal with murder cases, or has been in the past. I think she's got a new role now. But her thing was, she recommended to us that we start, when we're discussing kids here at the office, law violations, we start reminding the staff what we know about their trauma triggers and what they've been through.
Yeah.
And so that we remind the staff, hey, this is the same little girl that we dealt with as a rape victim 3 years ago. Or this is the same kid who was present when his brother was shot down on the street, while mom, the drug dealer, was inside flushing the drugs.
Yeah.
And he just bled out on the street, and his little brother tried to help him out. Well, now the little brother's 15, 16, doing his own armed robberies.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know how much it impacts what we can actually do with our recommendations to the court, but yet starting with that in the office at least lets everybody know, and we're all looking at each other saying, oh yeah, now I remember. Because you're dealing with a churn of hundreds a year.
Yeah, and it's crazy too, because like everyone reacts to trauma differently. So like, you know, if two brothers witness the same exact thing, you can have one skyrocket one direction, one skyrocket the other direction.
That's right.
And it's one of those things where it almost just takes time to notice, you know, okay, what are their triggers? They're not old enough and mature enough to say, hey, this is what triggers me. It's kind of something you just have to observe and watch over time. And, you know, sometimes it can take a week, sometimes it can take several years to really understand what's happening to trigger them. And I mean, it's just a learning process for each and every single kid. I mean, you know, I'm sure there's, you know, overall patterns and things like that. But I mean, really, unless you get to know these kids personally and, you know what they go through, you know, their history, you know, their background, you know, what kind of situations they get more uncomfortable in and stuff. I mean, no one's ever going to be able to fix it unless those are things that you notice.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really true. I've dealt with people with some really horrendous stories they've been through, and they just really single-mindedly went after their goals to do certain things to stay away from that.
Absolutely.
And managed to get through it.
Right.
So yeah, that's a really good point, Jennifer. Any questions about Jennifer, the police officer? Because we're going to make a switch here in a second. Give you a minute to either let me know to hit your mic on or to type a question in the chat feature. Either of those things is fine with me. Where's my share? Here it is. Yeah, I'll just get really good at this program, and then University of Mississippi will change it.
Yeah.
Or I'll change universities and have to learn an entirely different one.
Right.
Because see, this just pops up, but it doesn't pop up like it used to. All right, I don't have any questions yet, so we're going to move to something else. I don't know exactly what to call it. I'll let Officer Rubin explain it, but it's one of your questions about what else do we do other than our careers. So we're going to ask that question and then talk about it. So I'm going to put a website up here, hit share. And I probably deleted it in my scramble to try to make sure that the screen was good. So let's see what I got. All right. Why don't we go through what rocking in relief is?
Yeah, so I was 12 years old and was exposed to police officers through just different community events that I participated in. And I started a 501c3 nonprofit called Rockin' for Relief. And back when what we do is we send volunteers to different gas stations, grocery stores, restaurants, and retail locations, and we have volunteers rocking a rocking chair for up to 10 hours straight. And they collect money for families of police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics who were killed in the line of duty. Our very first year, we rocked at a local gym and quickly realized that not a lot of people would bring their spare change inside with them to a gym. So we only raised about $750, and about 500 of that was from friends and family before I'd even started my day. Since then, we've expanded tremendously geographically. We were given several locations to work with. We've recruited volunteers, and since 2009, we've raised more than $200,000, and our 2019 events are coming up very quickly. So we are continuing to grow, and it's just something that's really important to us as far as, you know, our job is dangerous, and you think and you hope that it never happens to you, but if it does, you know your family's still taken care of.
So how's the disbursement go with this?
So the money goes directly to Backstoppers, which is a nonprofit up in St. Louis. They cover 18 counties between Missouri and Illinois. So the money goes directly to them. And then if a first responder dies, there's an initial $5,000 check that's written to the family saying, hey, cover funeral costs. We're not going to talk about anything right now. Just do your grieving and everything like that. A couple weeks go by, and they actually go in and they start paying off cars and houses, like whatever the family needs. They'll start knocking them off the list one by one. They pay off, college tuition. They pay off private school tuition for the kids younger than college age and things like that. So they actually don't just, give you some money and they leave. They actually stay involved with these people's lives throughout the years and everything. And it's just something, they understand that, the worst has happened. You spend every single day worrying about your relatives that are first responders. And I'm actually engaged to a firefighter, so I never really quite understood how that family aspect worked with it until, we got together and things like that. But you spend every day worrying about these people, and then you just that dreaded phone call that you get, or you all of a sudden you got 2 police officers knocking on your door and everything, and you cannot. It's the worst nightmare, but you're living it all of a sudden. And so Backstoppers and through Rockin' for Relief, we realize that, and we know that you also lose a paycheck. Maybe they're the only person working in the house, or maybe you guys both have to work to pay the bills and things like that. And so Backstoppers does everything that it can to pay off those bills, because you're already stressing enough over going through your worst nightmare. We don't want you to stress financially also.
Are there similar organizations like this across the country? Because
Yes.
I could imagine these students are from all over,
Yes.
mainly all over the South, but I won't really say that,
Yeah.
because I do have students from all over the country.
Yeah, so
what else?
Backstoppers covers 18 counties between Missouri and Illinois, and they're known to be one of the best in their country, and they actually send their board members out to different parts of the country to create similar organizations and to help them get started. So I don't know the names of all the specific ones because they're all completely different names, but I know Backstoppers keeps a list of it. So if you guys want, you guys can contact Backstoppers, or just, I'm sure Googling it, you can find it, just, supporting the families of the fallen first responders. And usually there's at least some kind of organization somewhere, because some of the bigger departments, like Highway Patrol and things like that, they keep a fund set aside in case something like that were to happen. But a lot of the smaller agencies don't have something like that. So these nonprofits step in and really, really make a big difference.
And in years past, this wasn't there.
Right.
I've helped Victims Impact Panel for years and had Mrs. Fromsdorf on our panel.
Yeah.
And when her husband was killed as a highway patrolman, she was a housewife.
Yeah.
And so she had to immediately go back to school,
Right.
incurred a lot of debt.
Oh, yeah.
Get her nurse's training, worked herself up from there to support her 4 daughters.
Right.
So there was nothing.
Right.
So other than the life insurance policy that the Highway Patrol had. So
right.
Yeah, so this is a great thing. So Jennifer put this together. She don't know I have this page up. Plus I have also a safe search on, so I don't come up with any other Jennifer Rubens we really don't want to see.
Nothing to hide, I promise.
So, yeah, any of these pictures here you want to talk about?
That one with the green shorts.
This guy?
Nope, down.
Down?
And then to the right, some.
To the right.
The green shorts.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. All right.
That was when I was 12, so that was my very, very, very first event.
That's the first Rockin' for Relief when you first came up with the concept.
Yeah.
How did you get the help? Because in my criminal justice class, we talk about a concept and about a problem statement.
Mm-hmm.
Who helped you kind of pull the idea into a hand-holding
Yeah,
thing?
so we've ran through a lot of obstacles. The very first year, again, like I said, we rocked at a gym, realized that wasn't the best place to collect donations from people. So the next year we actually changed from a gym to a grocery store. And when we went to the grocery store, we nearly tripled what we had done at the gym and realized that we had some potential. And so it was actually the grocery store's idea saying like, hey, let's give you a handful of locations and recruit some friends and see what you can do. And so I recruited some friends, and I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, it escalated. Once I came to college, we started talking to fraternities and sororities and things like that. But we've hit a lot of obstacles, I happened to move away from St. Louis 3 weeks after Ferguson happened. And so between me moving away and between, this whole different atmosphere that had just happened within St. Louis, our fundraiser, we took a big hit that year. We took about a $5,000 decrease that year. And we just, I think, caught back up to it maybe last year. So it's one of those things where, the social impact, unfortunately, we fall into a political field, even though we shouldn't be falling into a political field. And that's definitely something that we've noticed, not only me as a police officer, but me as a founder of this organization. So that's definitely a big obstacle that, we've hit and we are still continuing to heal from, and things like that. You run into the problems of, just small problems, because right now we're running about 150 volunteers an event. So you have, people get sick and all of a sudden this location isn't covered, or you have, we've started sealing our donation boxes because we thought that someone had gotten into one year, and you run into these people who, and again, we use high school kids, college kids. You have some stranger walk up to a high school kid at this event and start talking about how they don't like police officers, but we haven't necessarily, quote unquote, trained them on how to answer that, and things like that. And so we constantly run into like interpersonal issues, just with people being at stores and stuff. And we run into, we've luckily dwindled out a lot of like the manpower issues that we've been having. We have a great amount of people this year ready to go. Our Cape Girardeau events this weekend, and our St. Louis event is the first weekend of November. So it's all quickly approaching, and we have a lot of logistics that go into it. This is the first year we've had a leadership team. So the leadership team has helped kind of branch out with new ideas and stuff, which has been really helpful. So just getting, this is my 11th year running this. Last year we got to break that $200,000 for our 10th anniversary, which was amazing. But having this leadership team has been great because I've been doing this for 11 years, and it's nice to get kind of some fresh eyes on it and to get some different aspects from different people and just to get things rolling in a different direction. So
I notice on this screen here with your main page that Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
So how'd you approach her?
It's on here. Let's see. So I was 15. And I was getting on social media, and I was on Twitter.
It's right here in the middle.
Yeah, I was on Twitter, and I would just send like, hey, I'm 15. I've raised $12,000 for families of police fire kit on the job, mind retweeting, and I'd send the website out. And we got thousands and thousands and thousands of website views through celebrities and broadcasters, athletes, you name it. I sent it to everybody I had heard of, and just getting people to retweet it and stuff. We got a ton of people to the website. Oprah answered me and said, I'll match what you raised and add $1,000 to get you to $25,000. And then she tagged her marketing manager in it and said, let's make this happen. So this was about midnight, and I was just couldn't fall asleep, started doing this. I'm 15 in my parents', house and everything. And as soon as I saw that, I ran downstairs, woke up my parents and said, hey, like, you're never going to believe what's happening. And they're like, oh, it's just Twitter. It's not going to actually happen. They're very like skeptical about it. And I tried explaining to them like, hey, there's a blue check mark, like that means it's actually them and stuff, but they still just, weren't having it. And so sure enough, the next day I received a phone call from Maya Watson, who at the time at least was Oprah's marketing manager. And 3 weeks later, we got a handwritten note and a check from Oprah in the mail. So, I mean, what I'd worked really hard for 3 years had just doubled within seconds. And
that's
so
just fantastic.
Yeah, it gave us a huge motivation boost. I mean, if she saw what we were doing right now, I think she'd be pretty proud. So
Yeah, I think so.
yeah,
I
it
know
was a
so.
huge boost of confidence, and for that. And actually, if you scroll it down a little bit more, yeah, right there. So so we lost. So I was a police explorer back in high school, and the department that I was at, we actually lost 2 police officers within 30 days of each other, both from heart attacks in the line of duty. The first one was Detective Chris Simpson, and I didn't know him quite as well. I'd only crossed paths with him a couple times, and he was doing a department-required workout in the gym of the police department, and he had actually just collapsed and never woke up. Officer Joe here, I had known him since I was probably 12, 13 years old. He passed away when I was 16. And he said to his supervisor, he's like, hey, I'm feeling chest pain. I need to go to the doctor. So they sent him to the doctor, and then they scheduled a stress test for the next morning, and then he didn't even make it to the next morning. And I'm like still to this day friends with this kid, and I know his wife and everything. And that would hit me really hard because especially, being 16, running this for 4 years, and he had actually came out the year before, like that check that we're holding that picture, he helped me make that. And he came out, was rocking for about half the day with us and everything. And, he devoted time and energy into Rockin' for Relief and into me and everything. And, especially as a 16-year-old, I was lucky at the time I hadn't, lost any grandparents or hadn't really like gone through any significant losses yet. And to have this, person that I could definitely consider a mentor, and just have him pass away from something like that. I mean, it was very, very eye-opening, very mind-blowing, made me want to do this even more. And then since then, we actually lost one more. Let's see.
I saw Blake Snyder's.
Yeah, I didn't actually know him, but I went to his funeral.
I didn't know him, but he was my nephew's Sunday school teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Up in Alton, Illinois, that area. So,
yeah.
It's a small world.
So. Oh, yeah. So this is Chief Silvernail's family, and Chief Silvernail, I'll find a picture of him, but this is his wife, and then his son is a fire chief, his daughter married a firefighter, and they're all, all the grandkids and stuff. And he was a firefighter back before they had, real good equipment and stuff. So he actually developed pneumonia, sepsis, and then pneumonia again. Trying to think of where he'd be. He's in a lot of these. But he has been to every Rockin' for Relief since the beginning. Yeah, he'll be in this one for sure. So he is right over here on this side. Mm-hmm. So he was just an incredible man, like so happy, so in love with his job, and just one of those kinds of people that would do anything, even if you didn't ask him to. He was just that kind of person. And I'm bummed because I really wanted my fiance to meet him, and my fiance never got the chance to meet him. But I mean, if you talk about role model for a firefighter or just role model for a decent human being or whatever, like that is your guy. I mean, he was just phenomenal. He's been gone a little bit over a year now, so we honored his family this year, or last year, I guess, at our event and everything. And his name is on our T-shirts and everything. He's just a phenomenal human being. I can't say enough good things about him.
And again, his death was directly related to his career, right?
Right.
Yeah. You're doing an incredible job.
Thank you.
I really think you are, and I'm guessing you want to step it up from here and hit, keep the word out there, keep more. What you have kind of an underlying theory behind the whole concept, or are you just kind of working with what backstoppers do?
No, so between the school resource officer and Rockin' for Relief and everything, I guess my personal theory just of why I'm doing all of this and everything is that people, like human beings, are very natural to jump to conclusions and to group things together, and it's just kind of in our nature. Not necessarily a bad thing because it comes in handy sometimes, but definitely something that we do. And so I think some people just jump to the conclusion that all police officers are bad. And so if I'm able to treat these kids well, they can't. It makes it that much harder for them to jump to that conclusion because they already know an exception. And so when I'm in the schools and everything, I work really hard to build these relationships with kids. But then with my fundraiser too, we like to keep a lot of young people involved, so they can interact with police officers as well.
I think that sharing that communication and developing more connection between people,
Absolutely.
More attachment between people.
Absolutely.
I think that's that sounds what I think you're trying to put out there. One other issue, back to law enforcement, that I was talking to Jennifer about when we started, and I'm going to again go back to share. Remember to type any questions you have on chat, and I will grab it up. Let's see. Share here. All right, what I'm pulling up is a portion of a police report. It's been, no, that's not it. That is not the redacted copy. Let me find the redacted copy real quick. Okay, I've lost the redacted copy, and don't want to bring back the real one again.
Right.
Anyhow, I will send you out a copy of a social services report. I won't send out a copy of the police report, but I was talking to Jennifer about the importance of the police reports that are written, and showed her one that just came in today, a 32-page police report, actually 8 reports. But if she could talk to us just a little about the importance of the written word, because I know as college students, and even me, when I go through the modules, the lessons, the things I write, the material I write for case studies, sometimes you just think it's grueling. Who's reading this? Probably nobody. Okay, and I want her to share a little bit about what she writes as a police officer, and then we'll talk a little bit about where it goes.
Yeah, so writing is very, very, very important, I've learned, because even if something like in the heat of the moment doesn't seem like an important detail, a defense attorney is going to ask you about it later. So it's really, I think the most beneficial part of writing good police reports is like the fact that you're going to get a subpoena for a court case of something that happened a year ago, and you're not going to remember every single nitpicky detail about that. And so the fact that you're able to go back to your police report and read it, and it helps kind of jog your memory. Because when you arrest people, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily getting completely punished for what they do. They still have to go to court. They still have to, go through the whole process. And if you don't write a good police report, I mean, you might as well have not arrested them in the first place sometimes. And so really being able to backtrack and to really understand the case that you worked and things like that's really important. I've also had, random detectives or, the DMV, an attorney, you get phone calls from all sorts of people saying, hey, I read this report, you did with this person in this case, and I just had a question about it, things like that. And again, like eventually these calls run together. Eventually you deal with the same people over and over again, or you've just worked so many situations where, like I'll receive a subpoena and I'm like, I don't even remember that person's name. And as soon as I look at the report, I put 2 and 2 together and remember, what had happened. And so really just relying on your own writing is so important, because it helps not only make you a better, hands-on police officer, it makes you better at testifying. It makes you better, just more professional because you're able to answer these questions that other people are asking and things like that. So, I mean, writing is just as important as everything else, or else everything else you're doing isn't going anywhere.
And there are a lot of different agencies that read these police reports.
Yeah, and that's something I'm still learning.
Yeah, and like I explained today, as I read through this one today, there was a couple situations that I had to go and ask questions about, because I knew that, the situation they were talking about, this one little girl goes, and the officer quoted her as saying, Mom, I wish you'd have died when they shot into our house last week. And that just rang a lot of bells to me, because I knew there was 2 adults, both parents live in the house, this little girl that we're working with, it's a chronic runaway, and then 2 little siblings. So it's like somebody shot in the house.
Yeah.
Nobody else has said this other than this just blurted out statement in the police report. So I ran around at least an hour today trying to make sure that there was follow-up on that there was another police report that addressed that the parent called the police. So our officer that was working the case from our side, the juvenile office, called the mom, and she said, oh yeah, we called the police, this was worked. And then when she mentioned the name of the guy that shot up their house, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember his name coming up. Right. Because I remember him when he was 12 years old. Yeah. And I was working with him because Mom moved to Kansas City and just left him here in Cape. So, and then when he got to Kansas City, I worked with him because he did an armed robbery, and still a juvenile, and they certified him as an adult in Kansas City and got all of his records. So now here he is, a 40-year-old man. I
Yeah.
worked with him when he was 12.
Yeah.
So, you know, it all kinds of, like she said, it all runs together, but you have to read everything that comes in, but this, what is written is so important.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure you're doing some editing, right?
Do some editing.
When you write these?
Oh yeah, I read it over and over and over again.
Okay, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Because I have a letter I've been writing now for 3 weeks that I'm on my, I always keep track. I'm on my 8th written edit.
Yeah.
So here we got a question.
I can't read that from here. How
often do the schools need a social worker to come out to the school for children who are being abused or neglected?
Oh, all the time. It blows my mind how many kids are being mistreated and how many kids, you know, and what, it's very like almost like a coin toss, because I got the little kids, so I'm sure the older kids are able to articulate things better, but you know, sometimes the kid says all these things happen and we go and find out that these things really are actually happening. And other times kids say these are happening and maybe something along those lines are sort of kind of happening, but it's not to the extent of what the kid, you know, kids blow things out of proportion, adults blow things out of proportion. You know, so as far as like, you know, we deal with social workers all the time because they're constantly out there. You know, because luckily, you know, teachers and police officers never were mandated reporters. So if we even think something's going on, we have to report it to get investigated. And so I'm a big part of a lot of those investigations with Missouri Children's Division and things like that. But again, you know, like the kids could look at me as a police officer and, you know, not want to quite tell me everything. But, you know, when you have a social worker who's in normal clothes, doesn't have a gun on their hip, doesn't have this giant vest, you know, bogging them down and stuff, you know, when you have someone that approaches it differently, sometimes it's really helpful because I can sit there and talk to a kid, and if I have a great relationship, they'll tell me everything I need. But sometimes, you know, I got 5 schools. I have so many kids I don't even know most of their names and everything. And so if, you know, a kid doesn't feel comfortable with me personally, they're not going to feel comfortable with a police officer standing there. So I very much appreciate the social workers that come in because, again, you know, like we were talking about earlier with the mentors, you know, just clicking. Some of these social workers really just click with these kids a lot better because you guys are specifically trained on that. So as far as like how often, I've already, you know, we're 8 weeks into school, probably at least once a week. And again, I'm just at the elementary school ages, so I can't really speak for the other schools, but I mean, at least with my 5 schools, at least once a week.
Now, do you have any school hired social workers right there?
We have some like liaisons, like parent, like school,
okay.
I guess school family liaisons. We have school counselors. We have, I believe there are some like I'm trying to remember what they call them, psychological examiners, maybe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely have social work, people with social work backgrounds within the schools. And it's important because, again, you know, if they see this social worker every single day, they'll be a lot more prompted to say, hey, guess what's happening to me, kind of thing.
Now, you got to remember, I'm an old dinosaur, so 35-year career. I've seen a lot of stuff. In the last, I would say it hasn't been 10 years, the last 5 years, I've watched an exploding of that career called social workers. So for example, our local hospitals, for all my career, there's been 2 or 3, maybe 4 social workers in each hospital. They're relatively big regional hospitals. I think the last check there was 15 at each hospital. The schools started just a few years back hiring social workers. You call them parent liaison, but they have to have some social work classes.
Yeah, there's so many different titles in the schools. And then actually to address her point. So I think, I'll rephrase my answer just a little bit because once a week, so basically Missouri Children's Division have 2 different things. They have assessments and they have investigations. Police officers are required to come along when it's an investigation. But like, again, let's say, you know, kid said something just off the wall, like, hey, my mom caught my house on fire or something. You know, that's something that we still have to report, but did it happen? You know, it doesn't sound like it. And DFS or Missouri Children's Division is allowed to do what they call an assessment, where they just look at the quick facts, and if it's enough to turn into an investigation, then they call me. So when I say once a week, that is something that has turned into an investigation, but they go out for assessments all the time. So the schools, I mean, we call it Missouri Children's Division. We deal with the same, we deal with the same social workers all the time. We build the relationships with them as well. And it gets to the point where we see the same one over and over again. And it's like it's a constant wheel. Like there's always people cycling through the building checking on these kids. And so when I say once a week, that's just as far as going into a full-on investigation. But I know a lot of Missouri Children's Division do everything from when we have to take a kid from a home, they have to go through the placement and and they do all these assessments based off of some random thing that a kid said and things like that. And so so they stay very, very, very busy. It only gets to the point where I get involved probably about once a week.
Now, a couple of my officers attended a training in Jefferson City last month, and almost all the major police departments were represented in the state. And within the meeting, in the discussion about how are you staffed, at least the officers sitting around the tables where my juvenile officers were, most of the large departments had police social workers now. They were hiring social work majors. They weren't police officers, they were social workers within the police departments. So that was St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, the major cities in at least our state.
Yeah, and even like just from an educational standpoint, like I picked communications because it's helping me be a police officer in a different aspect. Social work, that's helping you be a police officer in a different aspect. There's so many different majors and fields of study that help you be a police officer, because as a police officer, we're babysitters, we're race car drivers, we're social workers, there's so many things that fold into our job, and you never know when you're going to use which aspect. And so, and your supervisors and everything, they notice those tendencies that you lean towards. Like I had, one of my sergeants one time, was leaning towards this lady was crazy, but he kind of, her story kind of sort of made sense. And so he wanted me specifically to go talk to her because he knew some of the other people weren't going to have the patience and the communication skills to really work with her. And so no matter what avenue you do take educationally and with your training and, and your experience and things like that, being a police officer kind of allows you to use all of them, because again, you're dealing with so many different kinds of people and so many different kinds of situations. And while you might not be the best police officer for every single situation, you will be the best police officer for a certain handful of situations, and your supervisors will know that and they'll utilize that for sure.
Last chance to ask some questions here is where I'd like to always close these things in less than an hour. So the ones who aren't live will watch them. There's a sweet spot in these recorded videos. So I kind of know at this point, after 10 semesters, I kind of know my sweet spot.
Right.
So last chance to ask some questions here. While I have you, as you're typing a question, if you have one, don't forget to go on to the assignment on Blackboard and answer those 3 questions. And that way I have some record that you were here watching or that you watched the recording. And I think this has been one of my best interviews so far. This worked out really good.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Really solid. That communication major's right on the money.
Right, yeah.
That's good. I've had a few in that weren't communicating, but I did have one of my staffs whose husband's a highway patrolman who sat there very quietly, but I was smart enough to have the wife along.
There you go.
And so she handled it.
Yeah.
She handled it. She said everything Ron needed to say.
Yeah.
And then Ron would nod his head, and then we'd keep going.
Yeah. I'm going to have to talk to me myself.
So
I get it.
It worked out great. I really liked the way it was set up. So, all right. Well, I don't see any questions here. I'm going to get ready to shut this off. Kadisha, what are you doing? I see you kind of something on your face. You don't have the flu, so what's up with you on the side? What are you doing on the side while you're listening to this? I just gotta know. I'm gonna unmute you so you can tell me. Type it in.
I'm at work as well.
What are you doing? You're at work?
Yes.
That's all right. There's nothing wrong with 2 motives. There really isn't.
Yeah, we own a nail salon.
Okay, all right, well, that's good. You handled it really well. And like
Thank
I
you.
said, there's nothing wrong with doing two things at once.
Thank you.
Post on the assignment, all right?
Okay.
Okay. She needs a big tip. She's doing more than one thing, so give her a big tip. All right, I'm going to end the meeting. Thanks, guys.